Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Embassy Bridgetowns Out in the Eastern Caribbean panel. I'm Sarah Gevlin, Political Economic Associate at the Embassy, and I'll be moderating our discussion this afternoon. We have 4 great panelists from across the Eastern Caribbean who have agreed to share their opinions and experiences as members of the LGBTQI plus community with us, and I look forward to introducing them to you in a few minutes. After the panel, we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A, so please enter your questions as comments. And at the end of today's panel, we're lucky to have a brief special presentation of a new anti-discrimination initiative by Equals Barbados. But first, before we get started, I want to speak briefly about pride, progress, and identity. Today, June 28th, is the anniversary of the 1969 Stonewall riots, which are widely recognized as one of the most important events leading to the gay liberation movement of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. The first Pride marches were held on the first anniversary of Stonewall, a little over 50 years ago. And the end of June is also marked by a series of landmark United States Supreme Court cases. Lawrence v. Texas in 2003 held that criminal punishment of private homosexual activity between consenting adults is unconstitutional. United States versus Windsor in 2013 allowed the federal government to recognize same-sex marriages. Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015 granted marriage equality for same-sex couples across the country. And Bostock versus Clayton County, decided last year, holds that employers cannot fire their employees for being gay or transgender. This progress and the corresponding social progress it represents has had real-world implications for LGBTQI plus Americans like myself, which gives us a lot to celebrate. When my wife and I started dating 15 years ago, we would not have been able to be part of the embassy community here in Bridgetown the way we are today. I would not have had access to the medical, diplomatic, transportation, insurance, or retirement benefits available to my wife, nor would I have been eligible for the job that enables me to host this panel today. LGBTQI plus rights in the United States have shifted quickly, in large part because of the courage of activists and everyday people who have been willing to risk their relationships, livelihoods, and even lives to proudly speak their own truths. Audre Lorde said, "To search for power within myself means I must be willing to move through being afraid to whatever lies beyond. Nothing I accept about myself can be used against me to diminish me." The work is by no means done, particularly on issues relating to gender identity, but our progress is undeniable. While I'm not in a position to draw a parallel between the US experience and that of the Eastern Caribbean, it's through this lens of truth-telling as an avenue towards progress that I'm so pleased to introduce our panelists today, who will shine light on some of the experiences shared by members of the LGBTQI plus community in this region. I'm excited to listen and learn from all of them, so let's get started. Our first panelist is Stefon Barker. Stefon's gregarious personality has led him to the vibrant and rewarding career in the restaurant industry. Stefon is an enthusiast of cuisine, mixology, and how those connect people and communities to different cultures. He has a passion for equality and effective inclusion of the LGBTQ plus community into the workplace and society. And in his spare time, Stefon enjoys attending wine tastings, cooking, and traveling, and his favorite hobby is collecting ornamental indoor plants. Daniel Daphnis. Hi. Daniel Daphnis from Antigua and Barbuda is an Afro-Caribbean trans human rights activist and queer-identified man of trans experience. He is a certified social worker with a passion for advocacy and social justice after being exposed to stigma and discrimination against individuals like himself that are members of the LGBTQI community and observing the harsh treatment of other vulnerable communities. Over the past years, he's worked with various nonprofit organizations in Guyana, such as Mothers Union Diocese, Guyana Teachers Union, Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination, and Guyana Rainbow Foundation, GAIBO, to help combat prevalent social issues that suppress the minority and vulnerable communities in Guyana. Daphnis is an active member of Antigua and Barbuda Men's Empowerment Network, MEN, and an ally of Antigua and Barbuda Women Against Rape, WAR. Daphnis recently began providing free guidance and counseling sessions to members of the LGBTQI community and other individuals requiring this assistance. Welcome to Daniel. Tynetta McKoy of St. Kitts and Nevis is the founder and director of the St. Kitts and Nevis Alliance for Equality and a board member of the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality, or ECADE. Tynetta is an outstanding and brave human being who appreciates the LGBTQI community and is extremely proud to be part of such a culture. Tynetta also plays an active role in the political landscape in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Welcome to Tynetta. And our fourth and final panelist for today is Kineta Placide. Kineta Placide is the founder and executive director of the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality, or ECADE. They previously served as the Outright Action International's Caribbean advisor for 2 years and executive director of the United and Strong Inc. for 10 years, having advocated around HIV and human rights, inclusive of women, youth, and LGBTI issues for over 14 years. Seeking to remove barriers of patriarchy and LGBT advocacy on a feminist platform, Placide has worn many hats to bring attention and funding to the smaller islands in the Eastern Caribbean and works on a regional and international level. A runner-up for the LGBT Intergroup's Go Visible Award in 2012, they are the mind behind the planning and implementing of many Caribbean regional sessions. They were named the People Person of the Year by the Star newspaper in 2013, and in 2016, one of many called to honor as a champion of change by the Can Caribbean Partnership for HIV/AIDS. Placide was also nominated by U.S. Embassy Bridgetown to participate in the 2016 International Visitor Leadership Program, IVLP, called Human and Civil Rights for the LGBTI Community in the United States. Welcome to Kineta. All right, so now that we have everyone, let's get started. I was hoping that we could start by just sort of although I just introduced all of you, allowing you to introduce yourselves a little bit. So if you can tell everyone maybe a little bit about your experiences growing up, coming out, both to yourself and others, and how you've sort of landed on the identities that feel right to you right now. I don't know if there's anybody who wants to get started with that, but if somebody wants to jump in.
All right, well, I can start. Well, growing up for me, I wouldn't say I definitely had to come out, because I think naturally it was plain to see. So it was never a situation where I have to go and be like, "Mommy, this is who I am," or "This family, this is who I am." I wouldn't say that it was easy, because at some point I had some personal mental health issues to deal with. But me accepting who I am became very easy, because from a very young point coming up, I had the family support. So it wasn't much of a difficult task or whatever like that, coming out, basically being who I am, actually.
Okay, good. And I'll jump in. I would say a lot of the challenges that I faced were when I was a kid, and I grew up in an area called Pinelands, which is, you'd call it a ghetto in Barbados. So I was accustomed to being called a girl, or being called the derogative term, which we say bulla in Barbados. So I was very used to being called those names as a kid, I would be a 6-year-old kid, and the adults, or if I pass a block, they would say, "Stefan, your girl," because I guess I seemed, as they would say, girly when I was a kid. I also remember that anytime I cried or was soft in, I guess, compared to other boys, my uncle would ask me if I had any girl parts, or he would ask me if I got in parts. And it's only until I got older that I understood what he meant by it. He was basically asking me if I was a girl. So I dealt with that a lot as a kid, and I came to accept my sexuality in my teens, and I would come out to friends as years went by. I would say I didn't necessarily have that battle with my friends and family. I came out to my dad before my mom, because it was easier to come out to him, because him and I are actually not as close as I am with my mom. So I came out to him first, and even of recent, which is 2019, he was still very confused about what my sexuality was, and he was asking me if I was going to transition. He didn't use that term, but he was very confused about it. But I would say that I came out at a pretty young age, and I've had it much easier than other persons. As I'm 27 now, and in my young adulthood, I found that me being out is very different to how someone who more femme represents is treated. And I would find that my friends, they would say, "Oh, we like you because you don't act like the others." And when I was younger, I would think that that was a compliment. But as I got older, I realized that that was not a compliment, because you can't only accept me and not accept my entire community. Yeah, that's it for me.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so for me, with in regards to coming out, I came out in two ways. First, as in identifying myself as a lesbian at first, and then coming out as a trans. So I would start with coming out as a lesbian. So at a very young age, I guess I think it was around like in primary school, I had felt the attraction for women, but because of not having a lot of knowledge in regards to uh, the LGBT community and stuff like that, I thought that something was wrong with me. So over the years, at a young age, I was suppressing it. And then when I went to study at a university and gaining some sort of knowledge in regards to with the LGBT community, and also um, a friend of mine had took me to an organization to get a letter of reference, because we left our hometown to go to the university, but we didn't had like much knowledge in regards to like know that we have to get a letter of recommendation. So he took me to an organization um in Georgetown, the organization named Guyana Trans United. So that was my first exposure to a LGBT organization. And then from there I started to like um gain knowledge about the various forms, right? So after then gaining knowledge and stuff like that, I was like, okay, lesbian, the most likely feels and fit to what I'm feeling and experience, right? So for over a couple of years, I had identified myself as lesbian because I was attracted to female. Um, and then, well, I was already dressing in a kind of like unisex way in terms of like wearing um some femi clothes, but at the same time slightly masculine in regards to with the shorts and the pants, right? Not letting it be so close fitted. Then after that, slowly I started to came out socially, because at first I had to like came out to myself, because remember I didn't know exactly who am I, right? So after like I said, gaining knowledge in regards to with the various umbrella terms, I started to come out socially to friends, um, then to the community, and then the last set of um institution that I came out to was my family, right? As a lesbian, right? So after that, now I being a part of the organization, I started to go to I volunteer and started to attend the various workshops and stuff like that. Then they had workshop for um trans men, because I only had knowledge in regards to like trans women. I didn't know that there's anything such as okay, someone could transition from a female to male. I only had knowledge in regards to it, trans women. So after attending this workshop had like a lot of trans men from different backgrounds, different countries. You had from Jamaica, from Ecuador, from Africa and stuff like that, right? And these individuals were like sharing their experience, right? And how they feel. And I was like, yo, how they feeling is exactly how I feeling, right? So I started to do some research and stuff like that about trans men. And after gaining the knowledge, I was like, yeah, this is how I feel, right? So after gaining this sort of knowledge and stuff like that, I started to address myself as him, right? Because all the time I was addressing myself as her, right? Because I didn't have knowledge in regards to trans men. So after, like I said, being exposed to other individuals like myself and gaining more knowledge in regards to FTM, I started to um identify myself as a trans man. So that's my story in regards to like coming out as a lesbian and then moving over to transgender, yeah, and coming out.
I mean, again, Sarah, thank you, you, the U.S. Embassy, for putting this together. And colleagues, thank you for the courage for sharing your stories. Um, I don't know if for me there was ever anything as it coming out. I think there was just existing and being me. Um, and as a kid growing up, I was raised with my grandmother, very independent, very strong-willed individual, and you know, I was always into sports. I would play rough, and she always felt like I was always being like a boy instead of like a girl. I had to learn to be a girl, and I didn't know what that means because for me, um, you know, I just I just did things that came naturally. I didn't want to play with dolls. I wanted boats and planes. I didn't want to go and play, with the girls or stay inside. I wanted to play marbles and football, ride skates on the road. That was the thing to do. And, those things were just, when it was time to lift things around the house, you just kind of do it. Um, I always felt I was the stronger one. I had to protect my sisters. And I think as a young person growing up, I always wished I was a boy. I always felt like I was not meant to be a girl. And I remember when I turned 7 and started developing, and the whole idea of my chest growing, and this was like one of the most uncomfortable periods in my life because the boys who used to hang out and play with me all of a sudden starting to treat me different. And I remember at age 9, the first time I got my menstrual cycle, my grandmother was like, no playing with the boys anymore, no climbing the trees. And I was like, why? Because why are you taking away things I love doing? you know? So there was never really, I think, from a young person growing up, if my sisters or my parents had to tell you, some things were just natural. And I up to a day like today, I don't particularly believe in being labeled. I believe it's like boxing yourself. So I believe in allowing one to live through the experience. If this is who you are, let it show by how you live. And I don't think it actually has to have a label to say this is the box I need to be in. I understand, however, society requires this in order to try to understand or navigate, but I do believe that it's a restriction. Um, Although I don't identify as trans, I am male presenting. Um, I still go between, when necessary, the pronouns of they, them, she, her. Um, and I think I'm the last of 5 girls of my mother's children, and I always have to say it because navigating being the last child um, is also a difficult one. There's expectation from everybody that came before you, on how you should be or what they think you'll turn out like. So I think my family has come a long way. The people that I call friends have come a long way in understanding, and just seeing me as Kineta. I think one of the things that's probably growing up was most challenging was, from time a child, I have always been a very huggy person, a very holy person. I always like holding people and hugging them. And when you become an activist in the world that we live in, you have to be so much more careful with this because it can be misconstrued, especially for somebody in leadership. And I think that's one of the things I probably got most challenged with, in having to change that about me, because not everybody understands, that 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 kind of situation that we end up being in. So I think that, just continuing to be one authentic self, means that sometimes you have to kind of continuously challenge the norms, because whether it was liking to just wear pants or playing marbles, playing football, hanging out with the boys on the block, always an issue. And I remember, at first when people started realizing that I may have a tendency towards women, by simply of how I presented, it was very difficult walking the streets, because everywhere I passed, where there were a group of guys, they would call me the term zummy, and then it became sodomite. And it sometimes used to embarrass me, because to me, when we call those names, you speak to somebody, sexual practices and not necessarily the individual. And it was only after a few years ago, when I became a little more settled and accepting of myself, I realized that I started missing it. Because after watching a few photos, the only time I heard announcement of people before they entered the room was, the president is coming or the queen is coming, and I didn't realize the honor people were giving me before. So I started flipping what that meant when people call me names on the road, because for me it started being like an accolade, because you know who I am and you want everybody to know who I am, and you're bringing attention to me. Gosh, I was so damn important. And I think this is one of the things that helped me twist around, and also rethink, as we challenge people to accept us, we also have to make sure we can look in that mirror and accept ourselves.
Absolutely. And, there's a long tradition of, great, thank you, of the queer community sort of reclaiming identities and words that are hurtful, and sort of everything that Kineta was just saying, to sort of find that inner strength and pride. And I was also thinking, as all of you were just talking, and thank you all for sort of sharing your origin stories as they are, how funny it is that I posed the question the way I did, because I personally also am not really comfortable with labels. I'm happy to identify as queer, but then once I start being asked to drill down, it's a little mushy, right? I think all of our identities are, maybe not all, but many of our identities are constantly shifting and moving around, and it makes it, when we're asked to put a label on ourselves, it feels a bit constricting. And I think that that's not necessarily something that people outside of the community are aware of, because movies and TV shows sort of present things as you have to come out once, and then you are who you've come out as for the rest of your life, and it's a big moment. And sometimes that is how it happens for people, but more often than not, it's a process, I think, for many of us. So thank you all for sharing your own processes with everyone. I was also wondering if you could share sort of what has, if you found support, a few of you sort of spoke to this a little bit from your family and your communities, or if that's been something that's been challenging for you.
In my experience, I've not really looked for the support. I know that my friends and my family love me. I've always been very independent in that way. But I would say that there are persons, and it would also be nice if occasionally you saw that your friends and family are just there to celebrate your community as well. It's you find a lot of times when you come out to your friends and family, whether they're angry about it or disappointed or whether they accept it, they don't say much about it. They don't answer you if you're dating someone. They don't answer you how you're doing. They just kind of, I guess, brush it under the rug. But in my case, I found that the same way how you would have straight men talking about a girlfriend or going on a date, I've become very unapologetic where I am having those conversations about whether I go on a date with a guy. I'm having those conversations no matter where I am, who I'm around, because if it's acceptable for a straight man to speak about being on a date with a woman, it should be the same way for me. But I'd say that a lot of the time the family they don't want you don't feel comfortable going to discuss this with them or being able to speak in this way around your family.
All right. For me, in regards to with the support system, I would say my first support system was friends, and from and by getting support from my friends, I that helped me to be bold about who I am, and also having support from um my community, right? And then later along the years, my family, because now it's like I'm so proud and so happy with who I am, right? And how I looked and my transition throughout the years is like when any first time I would say I was a bit ashamed in regards to identifying myself as not really, I wouldn't say shame, I would say afraid because of the discrimination and the stigma and the violence witnessed towards the trans women. So I was kind of like afraid to identify myself as a trans man at first. But throughout the years, I've come to grip with who I am and love. I would say to everybody, the first step in moving forward and going a far way is self love and self care. Once you love yourself, you no longer care about what people think about you or how they see you. You just get to go about your life more easily. Yeah, if despite you hearing all those negative things, it tend to just go in one ear and just come out the other. So in regards to support, I would say first my friends, and then having that support from community, and then later along the years, family.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Daniel. But for me, what I would say it was when it comes to the family support in my teenage years, it was very they was there to support, but then also because of the most of the family got into the Christianity, it was still about you're supporting me, but then it's still like you're trying to make me be someone else that I'm not. But I think when I reached the age of 18 is when my family started realizing that, hey, this is who she is. and then they started supporting me full of who I'm actually am. Then, but majority of my support I would say come from the community or the LGBT individuals. In my early age, I would say it actually started from other LGBT members outside of the country, basically, because I mean, it was very difficult to actually find a friend who really just want to support you, be happy for you. You know, it's always in a sense like they're there for you, but they're still trying to change you, or trying to give you the concept that society wanted us to live. So for me, my main support started outside of the country. And I think from gathering that support outside of the country, build my personal confidence. And then among with other LGBT peers within my country, then we started supporting each one another, like basically teach one another, strengthen one another to support. So I would basically say I had support from each end. I mean, now I'm older now. I have full support of my family, which is good. But I still feel like, I mean, your family can be big. There's other individuals in the family still doesn't support my lifestyle, but majority does. So yeah, I do have support.
I think like many, I think the beginning stages were always a shaky one. I remember my sister tell me, um, my sister before me, she's the fourth. She said, "You're going through a phase." Um, and so I remember my grandmother passed away in 2008, and when she came down, I asked her, "How long does a phase last? Because this one seems forever." And we just laughed about it. Um, but I have to admit that the work that I've been able to do as an activist um, really came strongly knowing that there are a lot of things my family didn't understand. And at first, the road of accepting was difficult. And I think what contributed to that was the fact that in St. Lucia, friends of mine, gay men, in 2005, 2006, and 2007 were all murdered. Horrific murders. And so in 2006, when I started speaking up and speaking out, the fear was that I would be next. And so for part of the time, I wondered whether it was a case where they didn't accept me, or was it the fear of me being public, which had reactions. I remember every time I went to the television or the radio station to make a statement or to comment, or I called a TV show, I could almost hold my phone in my hand and time it. One of my sisters would be calling, why are you talking, so I think there was a very strong fear in losing me. But I have to say that I have two types of families. I have my blood relatives, my sisters, my mother, my nieces. The family is mostly girls. And then I have, my chosen family. And with that chosen family, almost with every meeting that I've gone to, every part of the world, I could now say that I feel that I'm supported and grounded globally through different people that have brought me into their own family. So we are a family globally. And, I really have to give kudos to Tynetta and Daniel, who both have brought me into their family rings, and I have brought them into mine, and as we continue to work across the Eastern Caribbean, this is the kind of work that we continue to do as ECADE, building families across waters, building families across continents. And so I think this is something that for me was so important, and part of me getting into this work was my father committed suicide when I was a very young child. And because I saw him do it, there's part of that image that's burnt into my mind. And when I hear people talk about suicide, for years, I always felt that I would follow his footsteps. I felt like any and everything that happened, I didn't have the means of working it out. I didn't feel that I could have dealt with situations. It was always thinking that suicide was the way out. And I remember in 2007, I started feeling that I need to leave to make changes. Because if I die now, the changes I want for me, which I also know other people want for themselves, will not be achieved. And so that was a major changing point. And I have to say that my sisters have been at my side through it all. And my chosen family has been there even more.
I'm glad that you said that. Stefan, you weren't raising your hand, right? I thought. No. Okay. All right. So thank you all for sharing that. I think the thread that Kineta just raised about sort of the idea of chosen family in addition to your family of origin is something that is part of sort of the global family of the LGBTQI plus community that that they also mentioned. I think even those of us who have the most supportive families, I think have found real strength and warmth and support from the family of choice, from the found family that that most people in the community end up having and finding. So really glad that you brought that up. I think Kineta also touched on via the murders of her friends, tragic and horrible. That there's also, in addition to sort of the personal challenges that we might face, that there's sort of larger challenges about being part of the community. And so I was wondering if any of you have other threads about sort of the way that society acts on you as a member of the community that makes your life particularly challenging that you'd like to bring up.
I would say some of the challenges that I faced and I still kind of have insecurities about would be related to my interests and also I guess my actions and behaviors. As I mentioned, as a kid, persons always called me gay or called me a girl because of the way I behaved compared to the other boys that were in my neighborhood. So Kineta mentioned the kid, she really liked playing with marbles and being outside climbing trees, etc. Now I really enjoy that as well, but I remember clearly that as a kid my cousin would come over and she would have a huge range of dollies and I would like to play with them. And I remember the family and my mom telling me I can't play with these dollies. And I never understood why I couldn't play with these dollies. All they said is you can't play with these dollies. And just growing up in that neighborhood as a kid, just having adults telling you, calling you a girl and calling you all of these names, it created a lot of insecurities with how I behave, and to this day they're still there, but I've been handling them a lot better and being a bit more confident in, as the other panelists mentioned, having that support from the family and also the LGBT community. We also saying that representation in the media as well, and seeing what persons have dealt with in the past have also kind of given me the courage to deal with these insecurities and any challenges that I face with my sexuality.
Well, for me, personal speaking, I will basically, just to follow up on what Stefan just said, for me, personal speaking, I would say the increase of stigma and the lack of equality within the community, within the country. Personally, from my personal experience, for example, when I was a teenager, I was raped. So, my identity has a strong stigma attached to being raped growing up. And I mean, even at this age, I mean, 10 years later, I still have to battle with that stigma within the community as well. So for me, those two would stand front.
Okay. So for me, my challenges is in terms of persons' perceptions in regards to trans, transgender, and trans men to be exact. In regards to persons still not, I would say, acquainted with the term, so person still identifies me as a lesbian, a stud. Yes. What else? And me a bit battling with um dysphoria in regards to with my chest. Also I would like to highlight the challenge in Antigua as well towards the LGBT community. Persons not being able to be free and live their life. Persons still have to be in a closet. That's why you're not really getting to meet more persons in the LGBT community in Antigua. Persons are still closeted because of the fear of being discriminated or being imprisoned at the same time because of the law that is in Antigua. So those are the challenges, yeah, at the present time.
I think when we look at how people perception, you know, whether whether it's an assumption or actual, I have seen how friendships were not really friendships, how people were not genuine. You know, people who know you your entire life, who know you growing up, or who grew up with you, and now that they understand or see that you identify differently, or they heard that you might be a lesbian, it's like all of a sudden the person who would say hi to you or you could have conversations with, it's no longer happening. The perception that if they think you're lesbian, that every woman you speak to you want. You know, the perception around who you sleep with and who you don't, or who you might have interest in. It's like it's continuous. And I think that when we navigate, I mean, even in our own LGBT community, we still have to navigate how we are around people, right? But it's twice as hard with the general community, who really do not understand. Like, sometimes you just want to be friends. You don't want to sleep with anybody. You know, yes, you might have a fast tongue. You might, you know, the innuendos might be there. You know, you might be very friendly and willing to do a lot of things for many people, but that might just be your nature. It does not mean that you want to step over those lines with anybody. And I think that's like understanding where people also see themselves. I think the other part of it for me is, you know, the stairs are still there. So 3 years ago, it's almost 3 years, I actually did top surgery. I took the breast out. It is not a gender issue for me. It's a body affirmation issue. And many people do not know how to separate the two. So even with that, now I'm even more male presenting and still do not use male pronouns. And I don't think I ever will. I am just genuinely being free and being me, and the happiest that I've ever been is now.
It's a great segue to the next question that I was going to ask, which was what have you all found particularly joyful about being part of the community? What's been particularly rewarding to you?
We keep finding new people. No, I think if we look at it, I mean, let's be fair. Everyone has their own journey, right? Um, we have been fortunate that despite our countries having laws which criminalize, um, and I'm going to quote that very carefully, the laws do not criminalize our existence. It criminalizes activities pertinent to our existence. You know, so people have to be sure about this. The law do not criminalize you for being a homosexual. It criminalizes you for practicing certain acts whilst being a homosexual. You know, totally different. And I'm using homosexual there in the very broadest of terms, because both under the burglary law and under the gross indecency law, it criminalizes both male and female. People don't recognize it, but it does. We are still able to create home. We're still able to create family. We're still able to exist. And I think that with the right support and thinking through, I mean, we all have trauma. We all have been through trauma. We all experience trauma through other people or situations around us. But how we deal with that on a daily basis, how we look at ourselves in the mirror and how we give ourselves chances matters. So COVID has been dangerous for many people. It has locked down a lot mentally. We have a lot of challenges having to restrict ourselves. And I'm sorry, St. Kitts, you're going through it now. We had it before. So, you know, but I think what you do matters. How you take your walk. Where can you walk to? How can you work out? Are you taking downtime to look at TV? Are you going to the beach? Do you have friends that could just make you laugh endlessly? All of those things matter. And I think that with different people, different times, different spaces, you kind of create that because it's what keeps you kind of grounded to, you know, just stick being real. And I think that my word for the last 2 years have been gratitude. And I wake up with a sense of gratitude because I have the breath of life to do something again. I have the energy, I have all my limbs, I have my body, my mind that allows me to do something that I didn't do yesterday or do something even better than I did yesterday. And more importantly, I think I appreciate people around me more. So for those who have contributed to my life, and even those who took themselves out, is also a contribution to my life because you took away something that I didn't need to deal with. Again, how we view things is going to make a difference in how it absorbs us or how we expel it. And being the happiest that I have ever been with myself, I find that it comes a little easier in dealing with other things that comes to me, you know, other things around me. So I think I'm doing the job that I love, that I spend the most time in, which is helping other LGBT people. And by helping them, I help myself. And then being happy with me is two, and just continue giving thanks to the big one up there, you know. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude.
Yeah, I think that Kineta covered a lot of what I'm sure all of us are thinking about, having that sense of community there. You know, and she's mentioning about, you know, accepting yourself and waking up every day with that gratitude, and that is so important. But also being part of a community that is just ready to stand up and fight for each other, and hearing the bios of my fellow panelists makes me feel extremely proud, because I can clearly see that you three are out there doing a lot of work for your communities and also the overall community in the Caribbean. And I just want to really, really thank you for that. And I am joyful for having people like you out there.
Daniel or Tynetta, do you want to add anything, or should we move on? That was a really wonderful dynamic right there. So
I think that Stefan and Kineta spoke for me. Yeah, they cover everything.
I think they did. Yeah. Okay. Well, then we can move along. One of the next things I wanted to cover, sort of as we come sort of the end of our non-official or our sort of interplay part of the panel, was to ask what sort of resources you would all recommend to people in the community who maybe don't have the support networks that you all have found for yourselves.
Well, for me personally, what I would do is encourage individuals to find a organization, do a lot more research and connect. I mean, if you can't find a local organization, you just get into it definitely helps a lot.
Tynetta, I think your audio isn't coming through, but I think you were saying people should look for advocacy organizations in their communities that might help.
Yeah, I think she was saying to find an organization in your country. And Sarah, it's good to say that in every Caribbean country, every single one currently have a LGBT organization, whether it's an MSM group, whether it's a lesbian group, whether it's LGBT human rights overarching. And sometimes when you don't find one, you still find spaces within Planned Parenthoods. You find some spaces within the HIV organizations that have focus themes and groups that you can work with. But at the moment, I could tell you across the Eastern Caribbean, ECAID has an LGBT group that's part of our membership in every single country. And even beyond the Eastern Caribbean, I would know for most of the, all of the groups currently in, whether it be English speaking, Dutch speaking, French speaking, there is a group in every country right now in 2021. They all provide different services. They provide, you know, they are different levels in terms of what activities they cover. But even if you cannot find a group in your country, find an individual. It does not have to be a gay person. It can be a straight person that you think has an open mind and understanding, but ground yourself with someone that you can speak to. I think that is most important. And even then, I would say that for persons who are out there, when people come to you to talk to you, have an open mind. Give them a space, give them a chance. Because the one thing that we have learned, Sarah, is we never sure which conversation might actually be saving that person's life on that day. We have so many people going through mental health issues. And on that day, you may have just prevented somebody from committing suicide because they don't feel they're accepted, because they don't feel that they belong, and whatever the stresses and traumas they are going through, they feel that the best way out is to take their life. So be open. Be open. Be non-judgmental. Just create space to allow people to be people, regardless of sexuality. For me, that's important.
Yeah. So I would like to add on what Kineta and Kineta would have stated. Yeah. Getting yourself involved with an organization would be very helpful for the persons them that are out there, and even for the individuals that are still like questioning your sexuality and still not knowing how you want to identify yourself. You can there's YouTube videos, there's Facebook. Um, I could even testify in regards to it that me moving to Antigua, not having much knowledge in regards to any LGBT organization, I went on Facebook and I typed in LGBT organization in Antigua, LGBT organization in St. Lucia, and from typing in those terms on Facebook, that brought up a whole broad set of groups and organization. So you can put yourself out there, but put yourself out there in a sense not to, even if you don't want to disclose your gender identity. Like, say for instance, when I came to Antigua, I wanted to be a part of the LGBT movement, but at the same time, because I'm in a new territory, I didn't want to like disclose my gender identity. So I went to they had like a general workshop. It didn't highlight LGBT issue. It highlighted some issues for the general public, like social issues in regards to like abortion and stuff like that. And going to those workshops made me had exposure to meet community members, and then getting to be aware of some LGBT organization in Antigua so that for me to network with. So here I am. So I can say it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're a lesbian or you're gay or whatever means that you have to, when you're going out to get resources, mean that you have to look for issues in your community to reach out to your community. There's other issues that you can look for and attend those workshops to provide you with resources towards disclosing, not really, I won't say disclosing, um gaining knowledge and awareness for yourself. Yeah.
Yes, and I agree with the other panelists. Definitely getting access to these organizations in your country, especially, is important. And I'd like to shout out Equals. They're there to provide safe spaces and access to services such as healthcare. They can help you get some lodging, and they do such an amazing job. Something that I've noticed is that they've also been able to connect with some bars and restaurants, where they've been able to have activities at these spaces, and so it it makes the community a bit more comfortable to go to these bars and restaurants, because these persons, these owners and restaurateurs, they're like allies now, and that's really really important to create those safe spaces for the community. So yeah.
Wonderful. Those are some wonderful tips. I think in the interest of time, we're going to transition over to our Q&A now. I know that we have a few comments and questions already posted on the Facebook page, but if others, if you're watching and you have a question that we haven't addressed yet and you don't see in the comments, please throw it up there. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on Q&A before wrapping up this section of our program. The first question that I want to go to is, and Nikita, I apologize for not saying this in advance. It's Juby's question. It's, Yep, there it is. I'm wondering, in what ways do you think we LGBTQ plus folks of Caribbean descent in the U.S., Canada, Europe, et cetera, can be helpful to or supportive of people in the Caribbean? And I guess I'd also extend that to say what, in general, so those are sort of global community allies, but also what would you suggest or hope that you would see from local straight allies?
Okay, so this is a very important one because I think the diaspora is important. I think understanding LGBT folks of Caribbean descent is important. And these are some of the areas probably we have not worked with sufficiently. But I think that when we look at how the groups on the ground are working, it would be great to be able to connect with individual islands that you'd like to work with. And I know based on where people are from, they always decide. There are also two other things that can be happening. Where possible, when people think about fundraising, they tend to think about just finances. Financing is important, but also there is also the aspect of skills, human resource. You're good at doing something up in Europe or in Canada, you can do a skill exchange kind of program. Where possible, let somebody come up. Where possible, you go down and give to the organization, give to the people on the ground, help introduce programs or products or services that can help enhance the life of the individuals there. And I think that with everything and everyone who wants to help, it starts with a conversation of understanding where and when is the help absolutely necessary and what are the areas to actually help in. So unlike some persons who would probably hope I can give a bucket list, which I can, but just note that what the needs of equals would be based on where they are with a safe space compared to where the group in Antigua may be without a safe space, and that might be a priority. So giving a bucket list does not help because you think it might apply to any of the countries. But I think depending on which country wants to be the focus, that would be the way of going. And I also think that if you think you want to do something more at a regional level, get in touch with ECADE. We on social media, almost all the groups are searchable. Like Daniel said a while ago, when he searched, you look for the country and you click LGBT, you get a news item, you get a Facebook, you get an Instagram, you get a Twitter. All the groups are somewhat visible. So search and definitely look forward to connecting. Conversations first. Let's look at what that looks like, what time frame it's going to happen in, and all of those things. But as we are now, just keep in mind that the LGBT community is one of the most vulnerable groups. And as we are preparing, as we are right in the middle of the hurricane season, we have no idea which country will be most at risk. At the moment, we all on the radar. So that is also something in terms of thinking through emergency response, just like we had to respond earlier this year to St. Vincent when the volcano erupted. So the help is always there. There is finance, there's human resource, there is skills exchange, there are products and services that you may have access to that can probably be donated down here. And so there are multiple things. It's just a matter of which one to which country.
Thank you, Kineta. I was wondering, does anybody else have any, I think Kineta did a wonderful job of sort of covering what organizational support can be given. Do any of the rest of you want to comment on ways that people might be able to be supportive sort of in their day-to-day lives of sort of the more broader goals of the community?
Okay. I would like to say how persons can come in and join the fight. Like typical example, healthcare providers. When any person for the LGBT community come to access service, you don't necessarily have to disclose that person sexuality or identity when they come to access service. You can just assist those persons just like if you would assist a general public. Because remember now there is still human rights. Everybody's entitled to healthcare. Same goes for the educational providers. If a child come to school, even if you assume that the child is gay or whatsoever, you can you don't have to like shun that child to disclose that child identity. You can just go about in terms of like just talking and providing support for that child. Don't shun that child. For um persons that provide transportation, even if somebody is presumed to be a part of the LGBT community, you can just provide support by in terms of like I said, not discriminating that person. You provide sources. So allies, you can just provide sources by just um assisting persons just as how you would assist another individual that is not a part of the LGBT community easily.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Let's see, we have a number of sort of in terms of sort of that allied support. I just wanted to mention that we have a number of comments over here, sort of just offering some general support. We have one from Daniel's mom specifically. There it is, which is wonderful. We have Star Reyes says, sending love to my dearest family, Kineta. We have one from Renee Holder, such honest conversation from the panelists on their journey. Thank you for sharing. So, you know, there's many, and I just want to thank everyone for being so honest and vulnerable and sharing sort of your own journeys. I think that it's clear that it's hitting home with lots of people. So, yeah, we can talk about this one quickly. This Colt Bolton was wondering if all of you have any suggestions for what other embassies, I guess specifically Canada, can do along to offer support.
All right. I think what any embassy in the Caribbean, or even not in the Caribbean, can do again is, I mean, they have many things diplomatic chains can do. One is creating support for the groups on the ground, and that comes with both the technical and the financial. There is also increasing visibility for some of those groups by also ensuring that they are included in different programs as well as receptions, creating opportunities for introductions to other individuals, whether companies or governments who may not necessarily have readily open doors to activists. I think that there is also an opportunity at the national, regional, and international level to also connect. Again, because of how the embassies work, being able to not just connect in country, but being able to connect across the region are things that they can do easily. And I think that is definitely the low-hanging fruits. And at the moment, Canada probably have an advantage because we definitely know Canada plays some $5.2 million or thereabout for LGBT work that's only now being rolled out. And I really have to applaud them because they have tried to make sure that some of those grants are connected to grassroots organizations
in the South. And so I say that it will also be important to hold the discourse. I think one of the things that we are looking at is more round tables of conversations with activists from around the countries, something EK can easily schedule for you. Talk to the activists individually, speak to them as a group, get a list of what you can do for the countries and see what's most impactful or meaningful that you can actually take on based on your restrictions. We know everything is not a go, even if we'd like to think that. And I think one of the things Canada and US can do is actually have some more joint missions. When I say joint missions, I mean joint activities. And so there's not necessarily a duplication of efforts. And I think that's just the beginning list. I'm sure people listening, other activists on the ground listening to that might think that this is very low hanging fruit, but today I'm being nice, I think, because I'm in a good mood. So, but I think that's like stepping stones, things that can be done now. But let's have a few roundtables. Let's talk to the activists running the different organizations, whether it be HIV, whether it be LGBT, whether it be women. Let's bring those together and let's see what we can pull out and actually form those programs that's within your mandate and priorities that can move forward.
All right. Thank you, Kineta. Noted. All right. So I think we're going to transition now. Actually, before we transition, would you mind muting? Mute, just there's a little feedback. Thanks. Okay. So I have one last question stemming from one of the other questions, which I'm not going to read verbatim, but I do want to just pose it because I do think it's a common misconception. Pose the framework of it, which is, do any of you feel like being a member of the LGBTQI plus community is a lifestyle choice?
Well, I personally don't.
I don't either. I find it very hard that someone would believe that you choose to be part of a community that is so reviled and to face stigma and the hardships and discrimination each and every day of majority of your life. So I don't think it's a lifestyle choice. As Kineta said that a lot of us, society tries to put us into this bracket instead of just letting us live and express ourselves and show that this is the person you are through how you're living.
I would like to add with the other panelists, no, I don't think that this is a lifestyle. Why would somebody choose to be exposed to discrimination and all those other violence that is put upon us? Why would somebody choose a lifestyle just like that? So no, it's all about person's feeling and how the person identify themselves. So nobody would want to choose to be violated.
All right, thank you all. I think that's a go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah. Question. And I laughed when it came up because just a few days ago, I think I was reading this and we were asking, there was a question being asked to straight people, like, when did you know you were straight? What determines that you are straight? What does straight look like? What does it entail? It's like the 50-and-1 questions that they ask to a gay person. And many a times there is the tendency to tell someone who loves differently that something must have gone wrong for choices for their life to be the way it is. And the whole fabrication around it, it is a choice, you know. I think the only choice some of us have is whether we give into it or we don't. And based on society, for a very long time, I wonder why even our religious leaders who tend to ask those questions would prefer someone hide that section of them and get into a relationship with someone else where they may bring forth children, and then the trauma all wakes up when this person gets to a point that they can actually, or they feel that they can finally be themselves. Then you have this other person and children now hurting from a relationship because this person was not allowed to be themselves in the first place. Trauma is something that's continuous, and we are perpetuating it every time we think that we need to second guess. Now, for some people, they don't have to ask why you have twins. They don't ask why your eyes are blue and mine are brown. They don't ask why your hair is straight and why mine might be looking like, we have a term here, late for school or dogler. But I think one of the things that's, and I think it comes with education and empowerment. And when people put the word of asking whether it's a choice, more often than not, they tend to tie this to some kind of hurt or trauma in your life with one sex, why you had to turn to the next sex for comfort, and not looking at those persons who are just naturally set in this particular way. And I think they are actually doing the individual a disservice, just like they do themselves a disservice. And I'm sorry to say that I was raised, I wouldn't say as a staunch Christian, but I was raised within faith. And through my years, it's something that I never let down. And I think this is where my sense of gratitude comes from. Because most persons of faith would actually make an LGBT person feel that they are not worthy to actually celebrate in faith. Like, you cannot have your spirituality. You cannot believe in a higher being or in Jehovah or in God or in Allah because of this part of you. And it is so wrong. Because as a human being, you have the right. You know, does it have to be trauma to be this way? And is it really a choice? So you got up and you knew that you are heterosexual, and someone else got up this morning and knew that this is they are homosexual. And I think there's a clear case of that. We don't have to question why you heterosexual. And so my question is, why do you feel you need to question why someone else is homosexual? How does that affect you? How does it prevent you from being you? And if our right to be who we are is infringing on somebody else's right to be, I would understand that question at any point. But not when it's a means of trying to justify their means against the existence of something different from what they call the norm. So sorry if I don't have a flat or straight out answer. Sometimes it just irks me that this is even a question all to begin with.
Yes, and in regard to your about Trump, when I first came out to my dad, the first question he asked me is if I was ever molested as a kid. You know, that's the first place his mind went to, that trauma. And that's not something that I experienced, but it is something that other persons have. But it was funny that that's exactly where his mind went. And people always think that there's some kind of trauma that you went through that made you, regards to, and in Barbados you say a lot with how people think about lesbians. They think that, oh, she's a lesbian because a man harmed she or broke her heart, or is she just going through a phase, that's why she gone to women. And you see and you hear a lot in Barbados, as if you just once again getting put into that box. If a lady or a gentleman wakes up one day and decides that they want to date or be in a relationship with someone of the same sex, that's their right, and there should be no questions about why that person decides to date that person of the same sex. You know, it's yeah, that's just how it should be. It shouldn't be a case of trauma or heartache or any of the other mentions that people come with.
All right. Thank you both, and thanks to all of you. I think we're gonna wrap up this portion of our program now and transition over to our last sort of segment, which is a special presentation by Equals. So I'm pleased to now turn the virtual stage over to Michael Rapley of Equals. Michael is the chair and founder of Equals, an LGBTQ plus organization that focuses on assisting the LGBTQ plus community in accessing services that they don't have due to stigma and discrimination. This includes having a community site that's shared with other local LGBTQ plus organizations where some of these services are provided. Equals also advocates for the rights of the community by engaging with government officials and providing sensitization workshops for various sectors. And today, Michael will be introducing a new initiative by Equals, which is a campaign to promote inclusion in Barbados. So, Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I just want to thank all of the panelists for a very engaging panel discussion. And thank you all for sharing your experiences with everyone. But, you know, since history began, those with different characteristics to what has been deemed normal or acceptable have always been stigmatized and discriminated against, many times at the cost of their own life. We at Equals believe in equal rights and access for all persons, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, sexual characteristics, ability, health status, or any other characteristics that would result in a person becoming oppressed, once it does not infringe on the rights of another individual. Equals has been providing access to sensitized services, including HIV and STI testing, access to PrEP, psychosocial counseling, legal advice, care packages, especially in the COVID-19 pandemic, and human rights violation reporting. All of this over the past 4 years. In addition, Equals has been providing sensitization training for different sectors, including healthcare, which includes the public facilities, as well as private practitioners, welfare personnel, social workers, and more recently, the workers' unions and local businesses. With the passing of the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act last year, a person cannot be discriminated by or at a place of employment based on their sexual orientation, and companies must update their written policies to reflect this. While the Act does unfortunately exclude persons based on their gender identity, expression, and sexual characteristics, we take an inclusive approach in our trainings to encourage businesses to include these characteristics in their updated policies. The fight for equality is far from over, and while we see legislative changes are being made, none of that matters if there is not also attitudinal changes. Which is why we are not only promoting our sensitization trainings, but would like to introduce our anti-discrimination campaign, Generation We. Generation We is a social media campaign that will promote the inclusion of marginalized groups while creating safe spaces for equal. This campaign is being supported by American Development Fund, and therefore we once again would like to send our thanks to the government and citizens of the United States of America for supporting our fight for inclusivity and acceptance. While the campaign will be focused on the LGBTQ community for the part of the project, we are hopeful that it can also be utilized as a platform for other marginalized groups to have their voices heard. Generation We was inspired by the need of generational change that can only be done through a lens of inclusivity. We have to all work together, share this space and this island together, and we all have a professional duty to uphold. Together, we can fight for equal rights and inclusion in Barbados. Community is more than you and I, it's all a we. Thank you once again to the US Embassy for allowing us this platform to share this campaign, and you can visit our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram at equals246 to view more about the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you again to all of our panelists. I appreciate everybody's willingness to join today, to listen, to share, and to help educate both each other and those of us who are watching today. I hope that if you are a straight ally, or a member of the community who's becoming an ally, that you've learned sort of more about what it's like to be a member of the LGBTQI plus community here in the Eastern Caribbean, and have been able to start thinking through some ways that you can be more supportive. And if you are a member of the community who is looking for more resources or support, that you've also been able to find and learn about how to go about doing that. So with that, we're going to end our session today. Thank you again to everybody for their courage and openness. And I look forward to this hopefully being the first of many such engagements as we continue our work. Goodbye, everyone.